The truth of the galaxy was written in spreadsheets and trade tariffs, a delicate architecture of commerce overseen by the consortium of aligned worlds. War was a vulgarity, a failure of negotiation, a chaotic variable that disrupted profit margins and destabilized markets. The consortium's military, the esteemed Aegis fleet, was less an instrument of conquest and more a finely tuned scalpel for excising piracy, enforcing sanctions, or quelling minor colonial disputes. Its ships were marvels of clean design and efficient energy expenditure. Its officers trained in game theory and risk assessment. They were peacekeepers, regulators, and when the silicate swarm first appeared at the galactic rim, they were annihilated. The swarm did not declare war. It was a phenomenon, like a supernova or a rogue black hole. It arrived as a glittering cloud of nanomachines that descended upon worlds, dismantling everything: cities, mountains, oceans, life, and reassembling the raw matter into more of itself. It was an engine of conversion, implacable and utterly silent. The final stand of the 7th Aegis Armada at the Cygnus threshold was not a battle. It was a sterile deconstruction. Consortium battleships, each worth the gross domestic product of a dozen systems, were simply erased. Their shields flared and died, their hulls unstitched atom by atom. There were no hails, no demands, no screams over the comms, just a creeping, crystalline tide that consumed light and matter with equal indifference. Aboard the orbital nexus station, Prime Spire, Consortium Director Xylar of the Vestin assemblage watched the last tactical display blink into static. His multifaceted eyes, evolved to perceive 1,000 shades of corporate deceit, could not process the absolute negation on the screen. The Armada was gone. The Cygnus threshold, a trade route that had been the lifeblood of the outer sectors for a millennium, was gone. And the swarm was coming. The emergency session in the Grand Conclave was a symphony of controlled panic. Holographic representatives from 100 worlds flickered around the obsidian chamber, their voices a low hum of existential dread. They proposed rerouting trade, deploying automated minefields, even attempting to communicate with the swarm, offering it entire barren systems to consume. Each proposal was a sterile, logical response to an illogical threat. Xylar let them debate, his clawed hands steepled before him. He had spent the last cycle in the deep archives, running predictive models against the swarm's advance, cross-referencing it with every forbidden text and redacted file the consortium held. There was only one scenario, however improbable, that didn't end in the complete conversion of all known space. He waited for a lull in the panicked discourse, then activated his own display. The image that materialized in the center of the room silenced them all. It was a planet of violent blue oceans and swirling white clouds, a jewel of impossible vibrancy. It was labeled with a single and ominous glyph, a circle with a cross inside. "I propose we activate Contingency Umbra." Xylar's voice was dry, like shifting sand. A wave of revulsion and disbelief rippled through the conclave. Contingency Umbra was a myth, a dark joke told by archivists. It meant opening the Sol quarantine. The Sol system had been discovered centuries ago, a cosmic anomaly, a single planet teeming with life that had, against all odds, produced a sentient, tool-using species. But the initial observation reports were so horrifying that the consortium founders had taken the unprecedented step of sealing the entire system behind a chronoton-laced energy field, wiping its location from all public star charts and classifying its inhabitants as a Tier 1 existential hazard. The species called itself human. Xylar brought up the archived footage. The conclave watched in stunned silence. They saw grainy, black and white images of trenches filled with mud and bodies, men in crude helmets charging into machine gun fire. They saw cities turn to rubble, continents engulfed in firestorms. They saw the mushroom cloud of a nuclear detonation, a symbol of self-destruction so profound it defied consortium logic. They saw a history written not in treaties and trade, but in blood and iron, a relentless, cyclical saga of conflict where technological advancement was measured primarily in the efficiency of killing. "They are monsters," rasped the delegate from Elysia Prime, "a being of pure energy. They are a plague upon their own world. Unleashing them would be madness. The swarm is a plague upon all worlds," Xylar countered, his voice cutting through the dissent. "We are facing an entity that does not negotiate, that does not reason, that cannot be bought or intimidated. We are deploying fleets designed to police merchants against a force that consumes suns for fuel. We fight with logic. The swarm is post-logical, but these humans, they are pre-logical. They fight with something else. They fight with rage, with desperation, with a capacity for violence that is not born of strategy, but of instinct. They have spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. Let us, for once, point them in a different direction." The debate was short and brutal, but with the swarm now consuming the Orion Spur, desperation won. The vote was passed. Xylar himself would lead the contact mission. His ship, the Gilded Venture, was not a warship but a corporate frigate, designed for hostile takeovers, not first contact. As it passed through the shimmering veil of the quarantine field, the ship's sensors were immediately assaulted. Hundreds of kinetic kill vehicles, relics of a bygone era, hurtled towards them from the planet's moon and asteroid belt. Ancient defense satellites, dormant for centuries, blared warnings in forgotten languages. Earth was not just quarantined from the outside, it had barricaded itself from within. A paranoid world perpetually waiting for the next war. Xylar broadcast the universal peace signal, a mathematical sequence based on prime numbers. The response was not a greeting, but a challenge, a heavily encrypted data packet that demanded identification and intent. Its subroutines aggressively probing the Gilded Venture's firewalls. A voice, coarse and deep, crackled over the comm. "This is Terran Defense Command. You are in restricted space. Identify or be vaporized." Xylar had the ship's linguists translate his offer. A cold, simple contract, an exchange of service for technology. They faced a mutual threat. He expected shock, awe, perhaps fear. He received a curt summons to a specific orbital coordinate over the planet's largest ocean. When the Gilded Venture arrived, it was met by something that defied its design philosophy. It was a warship, the TDC Retribution, and it was ugly. It was a brutalist wedge of gray armor, scarred and pitted, bristling with weapon emplacements that seemed both archaic and terrifyingly oversized. There was no elegance to it, only purpose. Aboard the Retribution's command deck, Fleet Admiral Anya Sharma watched the alien vessel on her main view screen. She was a woman carved from granite and patience, her dark hair streaked with silver, her eyes holding the weary weight of a historian who had studied every atrocity her species had ever committed. Beside her stood Commander Jax, the antithesis of her calm demeanor. He was younger, coiled like a spring, his knuckles scarred and his gaze restless. He commanded the Void Hounds, Earth's most elite shock troops, and he saw the alien ship not as a miracle, but as a target. "They're scared," Sharma said, her voice a low murmur. "Look at the energy readings. Their weapon systems are powered down. Their shields are purely for navigation. They're trying to look as non-threatening as possible." Jax grunted. Anyone who tries that hard to look harmless is hiding something. The negotiations were conducted via secure transmission. Xylar laid out the threat of the swarm. showing Sharma the footage from the Cygnus threshold. Sharma was unmoved. She had seen worse in the history archives of her own people. She countered not with questions about the swarm, but with demands. Full access to consortium stellar cartography, unredacted threat analysis files, complete technical schematics for their FTL drives and shield generators, and a guarantee of absolute operational autonomy for all Terran forces. Xylar, accustomed to haggling over percentages and clauses, was taken aback by the blunt, non-negotiable terms. It was not a plea for help. It was the presentation of an invoice. "This is highly irregular," Xylar transmitted, his diplomatic training failing him. Sharma's voice came back, cold as the void. "We have been alone for a very long time. Director, we have learned to be thorough. You did not come to us for our diplomatic skills. You came for our monsters. The price for unleashing them is that you take off their leash." Left with no alternative, the consortium agreed. The first contract was signed, the data transferred. The target was a test, the planet Attica 7, a former mining colony that had gone silent 2 weeks prior, now being processed by a mid-sized swarm cell. A consortium observer drone was dispatched to record the results. They expected Sharma to deploy a fleet. She sent only one ship, the TDC Retribution. Xylar watched the live feed from the Gilded Venture, hovering at a safe distance. The Retribution didn't even slow as it approached Attica 7. It fired no shots at the swarm's orbital conversion units. Instead, its belly opened, and it released 100 sleek, black projectiles that blazed through the atmosphere. Not missiles, drop pods. On the surface, the observer drone captured the landing. The pods hit the ground like obsidian spears, burying themselves in the crystalline structures the swarm had begun to build. Hatches blew open and soldiers emerged. The Void Hounds. They moved with a predatory grace that was utterly alien to the consortium's understanding of warfare. They did not form firing lines or establish a fortified perimeter. They scattered into the half-converted ruins, becoming ghosts in the machine city. The feed switched to Commander Jax's helmet cam. He and his squad were not engaging the hulking harvester units directly. They were planting shaped charges at the base of crystalline conduits, turning the swarm's own energy grid into a weapon. They used the terrain, creating bottlenecks in ravines, luring the mindless swarm drones into ambushes. They fought with knives and explosives in close quarters. A brutal, intimate form of combat the Aegis fleet could never have imagined. A harvester unit, a towering tripod of gleaming silver, rounded a corner, its optical sensor glowing. Jax slid from a pile of rubble, a magnetic mine in his hand. He sprinted towards the machine, dodging a sweep of a metallic leg, and slapped the mine onto its main torso. As he rolled away, he detonated it, blowing the machine's leg clean off. It crashed to the ground, helpless. The rest of his squad descended upon it, not with rifles, but with plasma cutters, dismantling the still-functioning machine for parts. They were not just fighting, they were adapting, scavenging, learning. The final image on the feed, the one that would haunt Xylar for the rest of his long life, was of Jax looking directly at the hovering observer drone. His armor was dented, his visor splattered with the swarm's iridescent internal fluid. He slowly raised a hand and wiped the visor clean, revealing a face of grim satisfaction and a chilling, predatory smile. Xylar's multifaceted eyes widened in dawning horror. The archives had not been an exaggeration. They had been an understatement. He had come to this forgotten system seeking a tool to solve his problem. But as he watched the Void Hounds conduct their symphony of savage, calculated destruction on the planet below, he understood that he had not hired mercenaries. He had opened a cage that had been sealed for a reason. and he had no idea if the monsters he'd just unleashed would ever agree to go back inside. The galaxy's spreadsheets and tariffs were about to be rewritten in blood. The report Xylar presented to the Grand Conclave was a masterpiece of corporate understatement. He displayed the final data from the Attica 7 operation, a flawless graph showing a 100% mission success rate with a resource expenditure less than a tenth of a standard Aegis fleet pacification action. The swarm cell, designated Cell 734, was not just defeated, it was, according to the final analysis, fully recycled. The numbers were irrefutable. A perfect outcome that should have earned him accolades. Then, he played the unedited helmet cam footage. The Conclave watched as Commander Jax and the Void Hounds moved through the crystalline hellscape. They saw the brutal, close-quarters combat, the visceral efficiency of a knife sliding into the biomechanical joints of a swarm drone, the savage cheer as a harvester unit was brought down and cannibalized for its power core. They saw the final, chilling smile from Jax, a look not of a soldier, but of a predator who had enjoyed his hunt. The silence in the obsidian chamber was absolute. The delegate from Elysia Prime shimmered with distress. This is not warfare. This is butchery. They are reveling in it. Xylar kept his expression neutral, though every one of his multifaceted eyes felt a cold dread. Their methods are unorthodox. He conceded, but the result is precisely what we require. They have provided a solution to an equation we deemed unsolvable. A grizzled Rigelian merchant lord, whose shipping lanes were now a crystalline wasteland, slammed a heavy fist on his console. A solution director. You have hired wolves to guard the herd. What happens when they decide they prefer the taste of lamb to whatever we are paying them? Before Xylar could formulate a response, the entire conclave chamber pulsed with red light as a Priority 1 alert overrode all other transmissions. A live feed appeared in the center of the room, showing the familiar, elegant orbital rings of Vestin Prime, Xylar's own home system, but beyond them, a vast, shimmering nebula was coalescing out of hyperspace. It was the Swarm, and it was 1,000 times larger than the fleet that had consumed the Cygnus threshold. It was not an exploratory cell, it was a primary conversion wave. Aboard the TDC Retribution, now docked at a hidden station in Earth's asteroid belt, Admiral Sharma and Commander Jax reviewed the same footage from Attica 7. Jax was cleaning his combat knife, the motions practiced and precise. They fought like disorganized automata, he commented, his tone bordering on disappointment. No unit cohesion, no flanking maneuvers, just a wave of mindless consumers. It was a glorified pest control operation. Sharma nodded, her eyes fixed on the tactical overlay of Vestin Prime that the consortium had just sent, along with a desperate plea for assistance. The consortium's Aegis fleet is deploying to form a defensive cordon around the planet. They will attempt to hold the swarm at the system's edge, engaging them at maximum range with energy weapons. Jack snorted, pausing his work. A cordon against a tide. They'll be enveloped in the first wave. They think a war is a series of honorable duels fought at a respectable distance. They don't understand the arithmetic of the abattoir. Sharma's lips formed a thin, hard line. No, they don't, which is why they are about to learn a new lesson. She keyed in a command, her fingers moving with grim purpose. Signal the fleet. The time for tests is over. Awaken the Titans. The consortium's formal request for aid was met with a simple, two-word reply from Terran Defense Command en route. Admiral Kalin of the 3rd Aegis Armada, a veteran officer whose family had designed warships for 5 generations, expected a small fleet of the ugly and brutalist ships like the Retribution to arrive. He had already prepared a command structure to integrate the Terran forces, assigning them a subordinate role screening his flank. What arrived was not a fleet. The very fabric of space near Vestin Prime seemed to tear open, not in the clean, silent shimmer of a consortium jump drive, but in a violent, chaotic rupture that bled radiation into the void. From this wound in reality emerged a single object of such impossible scale and horrifying design that Kalen's tactical officers were momentarily struck dumb. It was the Argos. It was not a ship. It was a monument to paranoia, a hollowed-out planetoid, miles long, its surface a chaotic patchwork of rockcrete, scarred armor plating, and city-sized weapon emplacements. It was a relic from humanity's own dark age, the Extinction Wars, a generation arc that had been repurposed into a mobile fortress. It moved with the graceless, unstoppable momentum of a thrown mountain, and it was not alone. From its shadowed craters and fortified canyons, thousands of smaller, equally ugly vessels swarmed out like hornets from a disturbed nest. This was the Terran Expeditionary Force. This was humanity going to war. Admiral Sharma's voice, calm and clear, cut through the stunned silence on Kalen's bridge. Aegis Command. This is Admiral Sharma of the Terran vessel Argos. We are assuming tactical command of this operation. All consortium vessels are to fall back to these coordinates and provide long-range fire support. Do not, I repeat, do not break formation. Kalen's aristocratic features tightened with indignation. Admiral Sharma, you are a mercenary commander. You will follow my orders. Your fleet will take up a defensive position on my starboard flank and... Sharma cut the transmission. The Argos and its swarm of escorts did not move to the flank. They accelerated, plowing directly toward the heart of the advancing silicate swarm. It was the most insane tactical maneuver Kalen had ever witnessed. It was a charge, a concept so archaic it was only studied in military history texts. The Aegis fleet's combat philosophy was based on the scalpel. The humans were wielding a sledgehammer. The battle was a cacophony of controlled elegance versus unrestrained fury. The Aegis ships fired lances of pure energy that carved precise lines through the swarm's outer ranks, each shot calculated for maximum efficiency. In response, the Argos unleashed a storm of kinetic death. It fired salvos of city block-sized tungsten rods that didn't slice through swarm bioships, but shattered them. The sheer force of impact, creating expanding spheres of shrapnel that shredded everything nearby. Its thousands of point defense cannons filled the void with a wall of flak, creating a kill zone that no smaller swarm drone could penetrate. From within this storm, the Void Hounds and other shock troops launched their boarding pods. The consortium watched on their tactical displays, horrified, as human life signs began appearing inside the largest swarm command ships. The fighting wasn't just outside, it was now inside the enemy. On the bridge of a swarm Leviathan, Jax and his squad breached the central nerve cluster. The air was thick with the ozone-like scent of the swarm's internal systems. They fought through waves of crab-like defender drones, their movements a blur of controlled violence. This was their element. While the Aegis fleet fought a war of numbers and energy outputs, the Void Hounds fought a war of blood and steel. Jax planted a demolition charge directly onto the primary synaptic node, a pulsating, crystalline organ the size of a shuttle. Sharma, the package is set. He grunted over the comm, firing a burst from his rifle into a skittering drone. Get us out of here. On the bridge of the Argos, Sharma watched the main swarm fleet begin to envelop the overextended Aegis armada. Just as she had predicted, Kalen was frantically trying to disengage, but it was too late. Admiral Kalen, Sharma's voice broadcast across all channels. "Your models failed you. You saw a tide. I saw a funnel." She gave a single command, and the Argos vented a massive cloud of magnetized plasma from its forward engines, while simultaneously firing a focused gravity distortion beam. It was a maneuver of such reckless power that it risked tearing her own ship apart. The plasma cloud ignited, and the gravity beam bent the explosion, directing the force of a small star not at the swarm, but at one of Vestin Prime's gas giants. The resulting shockwave struck the planet's atmosphere, destabilizing its core and turning the entire world into a temporary, colossal gravity well. The swarm ships closest to the planet, including the Leviathan Jacks had just sabotaged, were pulled inexorably toward it. Their formations broke. Their energy shields flickered and failed under the immense gravitational stress. And then they were crushed, torn apart as they plunged into the swirling, incandescent depths of the dying planet. It was not a victory. It was a celestial cataclysm engineered as a weapon. The remaining swarm fleet, its command structure shattered, faltered. Seeing its chance, the battered Aegis fleet rallied, their precise energy weapons now able to pick off the disorganized enemy ships one by one. But everyone knew who had won the battle. Back on the Gilded Venture, Xylar watched the last of the swarm being mopped up. He felt no relief, only a profound, chilling certainty. Admiral Kalen was already transmitting a furious, detailed report to the Conclave, citing insubordination, reckless endangerment of Allied forces, and the deliberate destruction of a planetary body. It would do no good. An encrypted message arrived for him, for his eyes only. It was from Sharma. It contained no apologies, only a star chart highlighting a swath of territory on the galactic fringe known as the Tartarus Reach. The text below was simple and direct. The Consortium has proven incapable of waging this war. Terran forces will henceforth operate autonomously. The Tartarus Reach will be ceded to our authority to serve as a forward operating base and staging ground. We will send you our bill when the swarm is dust. Xylar stared at the message, the corporate diplomat in him finally admitting defeat. He had not leased an army. He had paid a rival predator to kill a greater one. And now that predator was claiming its new territory in the heart of his grazing lands. The war for the galaxy's survival was still raging, but a second, colder war for its soul had just begun. The Tartarus Reach was not a territory, it was a scar, a region of space so ravaged by stellar phenomena and failed colonization attempts that it was marked on Consortium charts with the celestial equivalent of a skull and crossbones. And it was here, amidst rogue black holes and radiation-blasted worlds, that humanity had made its den. The Grand Conclave's reaction to Sharma's ultimatum was a predictable storm of outrage and political maneuvering. Admiral Kalen, his face a mask of patrician fury, presented a detailed log of the Battle of Vestin Prime, framing the Terrans' actions not as a victory, but as an act of cosmic vandalism. He demanded the Consortium condemn the humans, revoke their contract, and deploy the full might of the Aegis fleet to bring the renegades to heel. It was Director Xylar who calmed the storm, his voice a dry whisper of pragmatism in a chamber howling with emotion. "And who, Admiral?" he asked, his multifaceted eyes fixed on Kalen. "We'll fight the swarm while our fleet is engaged in a war with the only force that has proven capable of defeating it." The question hung in the air, thick and unwelcome. The truth was an ugly, insoluble equation. They could not afford to fight the humans, and they could not afford to let them operate unchecked. Xylar, leveraging the very fear he now felt, proposed a compromise. A diplomatic and observational mission to the Tartarus Reach, to establish formal protocols and ensure the Terrans were adhering to the spirit of their alliance. It was a lie, and everyone knew it. It was an intelligence mission, a desperate attempt to look over the shoulder of the monster they had hired, and, to the surprise of no one, Xylar volunteered to lead it himself. The journey aboard the Gilded Venture felt like a descent into a forgotten, primordial hell. The clean, ordered space of the consortium gave way to the chaotic energies of the Reach. When they arrived at the coordinates Sharma had provided, they found a dead world, a rust-red planet scarred with impact craters, now designated Terminus. The human presence was not subtle. A network of prefabricated but modular structures sprawled across a vast canyon floor, connected by exposed power conduits that pulsed with raw, unfiltered energy. The orbital space was a junkyard of captured swarm husks and brutalist Terran warships, all being serviced by drones that looked more like armored insects than consortium servitors. There was no welcoming committee. No diplomatic niceties. The Gilded Venture was instructed to dock at a makeshift orbital platform, a slab of steel and rockcrete that looked like it had been ripped from the surface of the Argos itself. Xylar and his small retinue were met not by an honor guard, but by a squad of void hounds. Their black armor scarred and personalized with grim trophies, a sharpened piece of swarm carapace, a string of crystalline drone optics. Their leader, a grim-faced sergeant, simply nodded and said, "The commander will see you now." He did not mean Admiral Sharma. They were led not to a command center, but deep into the subterranean levels of the base, through corridors of bare rock and steel where the air hummed with a palpable sense of menace. The final chamber was less a laboratory and more a vivisection theater. In the center of the room, suspended in a crackling containment field, was a swarm harvester. It was alive. Its single, glowing optic darted around the room in silent agony as human scientists in heavy-duty environment suits methodically probed its inner workings. They were not trying to kill it. They were mapping its neural pathways, analyzing its energy signatures, forcing it to send out distress signals which they would then trace. Standing before the writhing machine, his arms crossed and a look of intense focus on his face, was Commander Jax. He didn't turn as Xylar entered. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Jax said, his voice casual. "We've learned more from keeping this one alive for a week than the consortium learned from fighting them for a year. They communicate using quantum entangled resonance frequencies. We can't jam it, but we've learned to listen. We know where their hives are. Director, we know how they think." Xylar watched as a scientist drove a vibrating needle into the harvester's central processor. The machine convulsed, and the scientist made a note on a data pad. "This is barbaric," one of Xylar's aides whispered, a look of profound disgust on his face. Jax finally turned, his eyes landing on the aide with cold amusement. "Barbarism is letting your civilization be consumed because you were too polite to dissect the monster at your door. We're not writing a scientific paper. We're building a better bullet." He wiped a smear of iridescent fluid from a nearby console with his thumb. "The Admiral is waiting for you, on the Argos. She wanted you to see this first, so you'd understand." The command deck of the Argos was the antithesis of the Gilded Venture's luxurious bridge. It was a Spartan, multi-tiered amphitheater of dark metal and flickering data streams. There were no comfortable chairs, only functional workstations. The air smelled of ozone and recycled air. Admiral Sharma stood before a massive tactical hologram, her back to them. The hologram did not show the Tartarus Reach. It showed the entire galaxy. "Director Xylar," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the vast chamber. Welcome to the front line. Xylar stepped forward, trying to reclaim some semblance of authority. Admiral, your unilateral claim on this sector is a breach of our agreement. Your actions at Vestin Prime were unsanctioned. The Consortium demands nothing. Sharma interrupted, turning to face him. Her eyes were chips of ice. It requests. It pleads. It pays. The time for demands is over. You came to us because your rules of engagement, your precious protocols, and your entire philosophy of sterile, long-distance warfare failed. You are now in a place where the only rule is survival, and we write the rules here. She gestured to the galactic map. Red icons, representing swarm infestations, pulsed across a dozen sectors. You see the swarm as a natural disaster, a flood to be contained. You are wrong. This is not a flood. It is an invasion. It has strategy. It learns. With a flick of her wrist, the map zoomed in on a dark region of space known as the Serpent's Coil. A single Azitude's massive energy signature glowed ominously. Our barbaric research has yielded results. The swarm is not a true hive mind. It's a hierarchy. We have located what we believe to be a regional command and control unit, a synapse ship, a queen. Xylar's blood ran cold. The Consortium's best minds had concluded the swarm was a decentralized, emergent phenomenon. The existence of a command unit changed everything. It meant the enemy was not just a force, but a mind. It could be outthought. It could be targeted. As if on cue, a priority alert flashed on the main screen. A deep space listening post on the edge of the Perseus abyss. A Consortium station had just gone dark. But its final, compressed data burst was painting a terrifying picture on the tactical display. The Synapse ship was not just commanding, it was creating. The telemetry showed new bioforms emerging from its pulsating, organic core. Swarm drones that moved with the speed and agility of Terran fighters. Heavily armored capital ships that seemed to ripple, their crystalline armor shifting to deflect incoming energy fire. It was adapting, evolving in real time to counter the very tactics that had made humanity so effective. It learned from Attica 7 and Vestin Prime. Jax's voice came over the comm, patched in from the base below. It knows how we fight. It's building anti-human weapons. Sharma's gaze never left the screen. Your Admiral Kalen would recommend pulling back, forming another cordon, studying the new threats for a few months while the swarm consumes another dozen worlds. He will lose. She then turned her gaze fully on Xylar, her eyes pinning him in place. I am recommending a decapitation strike. We have a window before these new units can be fully deployed. A small, fast task force, using the resonance frequencies Jax has deciphered to mask our approach. We will jump directly into the Serpent's Coil, bypass the main fleet, and kill the Queen. It was a plan of such audacious, suicidal madness that Xylar felt his breath catch. It violated every principle of Aegis Fleet doctrine. It was a knife strike in the dark, with the fate of the galaxy riding on a single, desperate gamble. The Consortium will never approve such a high-risk maneuver, Xylar said, his voice barely a whisper. Sharma gave a slight, chilling smile. I'm not asking the Consortium, she said. I'm telling you, you are the highest-ranking Consortium official on the front lines. Your ship has the advanced sensor suite we need for final target telemetry, and your presence will grant this operation a veneer of legitimacy. You wanted to observe. Director, here is your chance. You will either sanction this mission and come with us, or you will stand aside and watch us do it anyway. Make your choice. The weight of 1,000 worlds settled onto Xylar's shoulders. He looked from Sharma's unyielding face to the horrifying, evolving threat on the screen. He had come here to put a leash on the wolves. Now, their alpha was asking him to help them hunt a god. The Serpent's Coil was a navigational nightmare, a stellar graveyard where dying stars bled gravitational anomalies into the void. It was the perfect place for a monster to hide its heart. The task force that assembled for the decapitation strike was a distillation of humanity's brutal philosophy of war. At its core was the Retribution, Jax's command ship, retrofitted with a resonance cloaking device jury-rigged from the dissected swarm harvester. Flanking it were 2 Reaper-class destroyers, stripped-down vessels that were little more than engines strapped to a spinal-mounted mass driver, and trailing behind them, looking utterly out of place, was the sleek, elegant form of the Gilded Venture. Xylar had agreed. He had rationalized it as a necessity, a calculated risk. But deep within his multiple hearts, he knew the truth. He had been swept up in the terrifying, gravitational pull of human certainty, standing on his own bridge, surrounded by the quiet hum of superior consortium technology. He felt like a child watching 2 grizzled predators prepare for a hunt. Admiral Sharma was not aboard the Retribution. She commanded the operation from the Argos, a distant, vengeful god directing her thunderbolt. Her final transmission to the task force was devoid of hope or encouragement. No retreat, no surrender. The objective is everything. Execute. The jump was violent. Unlike the smooth transition of a consortium FTL drive, the Terran jump drives ripped a hole in space-time and dragged the ships through. The Gilded Venture screamed in protest, its internal stabilizers groaning under the strain. When they emerged, they were not in the empty void of deep space, but in a cathedral of horrors. The Synapse ship was larger than any of them had imagined, a bioluminescent monstrosity that pulsed with a sickening, purple light. It was a continent of living crystal and pulsating organic matter, and it was surrounded by an armada of the new, evolved swarm bioships. They looked like sharks carved from obsidian and lightning, their forms constantly shifting, adapting. The resonance cloak was holding. The swarm fleet drifted, unaware, as the small task force began its silent, desperate run toward the Queen. Xylar's sensor technicians, the best in the consortium, worked with a feverish intensity, their multi-jointed fingers flying across their consoles. Their mission was to find a weakness, a chink in the Queen's bioarmor, a vulnerable nexus point for the Retribution's main weapon. "Commander Jax," Xylar's lead technician transmitted, his voice tight with awe. "The energy readings are impossible. It is not just a command unit. It is a factory. It is converting the very dark matter of the nebula into new vessels. It's birthing them." On the bridge of the Retribution, Jack stared at the Synapse ship, his knuckles white where he gripped his command chair. This was not like Attica 7. This was not a mindless beast. He could feel its intelligence, a cold, alien presence that pressed against the edges of his mind. "Stay focused," he growled to his crew. "We are a spear. We fly straight, we hit hard, and we do not miss." The plan was simple and suicidal. The Reapers would flank the Retribution, drawing fire and clearing a path. The Gilded Venture would provide the final targeting data, and the Retribution itself would fire a single all-or-nothing shot from its primary weapon, the God-Killer torpedo. It was another relic of humanity's past wars, a warhead containing a micro-black hole, stabilized for mere nanoseconds before detonation. It didn't explode. It erased. They were halfway through their approach when the resonance cloak began to fail. A high-pitched whine filled the bridge of the Retribution. "It's adapting," Jax's comms officer shouted, The Queen is changing her frequency. She knows we're here. The effect was instantaneous. The entire swarm armada turned as one. Its thousands of optical sensors locking onto the tiny task force. A wave of bioplasma torpedoes, shimmering with coruscating energy, launched toward them. Reapers break and engage full burn jacks commanded. The two destroyers peeled off, their engines flaring to life as they accelerated into the teeth of the swarm. Their spinal mass drivers began to fire, launching slugs of depleted uranium at near light speed. Each shot that hit a swarm cruiser shattered it, when for every one they killed, 10 more took its place. They were buying seconds with their lives. On the Gilded Venture, alarms blared. The ship's advanced shields, designed to withstand pirate cannons, were flickering under the sheer volume of incidental energy wash from the battle. "Director," his helmsman cried, "we cannot maintain this position. Our shields are at 30%. Xylar looked from the terrifying spectacle of the Reapers being slowly, systematically overwhelmed, to the monstrous form of the Queen. His technicians had found it, a primary synaptic cleft, deep within the Queen's core, where the energy that animated the entire fleet was focused. But it was shielded, protected by layers of adaptive bioarmor. "Commander Jax," Xylar transmitted, his voice unnaturally calm. "We have your target, but our scans indicate your torpedo will not penetrate the outer carapace. The armor is regenerating faster than the initial impact can damage it." There was a moment of silence from the Retribution, broken only by the sound of weapons fire and the screams of dying Reaper crews. Then, Jax's voice, hard as diamond, came back. "Get me the exact energy modulation of that regenerative armor. Now." Xylar's technicians worked, their minds and machines in perfect sync, feeding the complex data stream to the human warship. On the Retribution, Jax turned to his weapons officer. "Can you match it? Invert the phase of the warhead's containment field to mirror that frequency." The officer, a young woman with a tattoo of a coiled serpent on her neck, stared at her console, her face pale. "Commander, that's not possible. The feedback loop would be catastrophic. The warhead's containment would collapse before it even reached the target. It would detonate inside the launch tube." "Then we get it closer," Jax said simply. He opened a channel to the entire ship. "All hands, this is the commander. Brace for impact." The Retribution did not fire its torpedo. It accelerated, leaving the dying Reapers behind. The ugly, brutalist ship charged directly at the Queen, plowing through a screen of smaller drones that burst against its reinforced prow like insects against a windscreen. It was a ramming run, a tactic so primitive it was no longer even considered a tactic. The Swarm Queen, as if in shock at such a suicidal move, focused all of its defensive fire on the charging ship. Lances of energy and streams of plasma tore into the Retribution's hull, peeling away layers of armor, causing entire sections of the ship to explode into the void. On the Gilded Venture, Xylar watched in horrified fascination. He saw the cold logic behind the madness. The Queen was focusing on the immediate threat, the charging ship, ignoring the consortium vessel that was still feeding it targeting data. "He's creating his own opening," Xylar breathed. The Retribution, now a burning, crippled wreck, slammed into the side of the Synapse's ship. The impact was titanic, sending a shockwave of crystalline debris and organic matter rippling through space. The human ship, its engines dead, its spine broken, embedded itself deep within the Queen's flesh. Now, Jax's voice, strained and gasping, came over the comm. "Fire The torpedo launched at point-blank range. There was no flash, no explosion. For a single, heart-stopping moment, there was only silence. Then, a perfect sphere of absolute blackness appeared at the point of impact. It grew rapidly, consuming the torpedo, the wreckage of the Retribution, and a vast section of the Synapse ship. The Queen convulsed. Its bioluminescence flickered and died. The sphere of nothingness collapsed in on itself with a final, silent implosion that warped the space around it. Across the Serpent's Coil, the swarm fleet went dead. The obsidian sharks drifted aimlessly, their internal lights extinguished. The bioplasma torpedoes, moments from impacting the Gilded Venture, fizzled and dissipated. The hive mind was gone. The body was dead. Xylar stared at the scene, his mind unable to process the scale of the victory and the cost. The Reapers were gone. The Retribution was gone. Commander Jax was gone. He had done it. The madman had charged headfirst into hell and killed the devil. As the Gilded Venture, battered but intact, turned to limp away from the battlefield, a single weak signal reached them. A distress beacon broadcasting on a Terran frequency. It was coming from a single, armored escape pod, tumbling amidst the debris of the dead Queen. Xylar stared at the blinking light on his display, a flicker of impossible survival in a sea of death. He was the ranking officer. His duty was to his own ship, his own crew, to escape this graveyard and bring news of their victory back to the consortium. But as he looked at the beacon, he saw not a human soldier, but the embodiment of the terrifying, illogical, and utterly indomitable force he had unleashed upon the galaxy. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his core, that he could not leave it behind. The rescue of Commander Jax was as chaotic and unscientific as the battle itself. His escape pod, damaged and venting atmosphere, was pulled from the debris field by a hastily deployed consortium salvage claw, usually reserved for delicate orbital repairs. Xylar watched from the bridge of the Gilded Venture as the pod was brought into the hangar bay. When the hatch hissed open, Jax emerged, not carried on a stretcher, but crawling, coughing, his armor shredded, one arm clearly broken. His face, visible through a cracked visor, was a mask of grim determination. He looked less like a survivor and more like a ghost that had clawed its way back from the grave. Xylar felt a profound, unsettling shift within him. He had expected gratitude, perhaps relief. Instead, he saw only a restless intensity, an immediate demand for the next fight. The news of the Synapse ship's destruction sent a ripple of disbelief and cautious triumph through the Grand Conclave. The swarm's advance halted, its disconnected legions milling aimlessly or collapsing into inert, crystalline dust. The consortium declared a new galactic holiday, the Day of Silent Victory, and lauded Xylar as a visionary leader. He, in turn, ensured that the full, unvarnished details of humanity's sacrifice were broadcast, crediting Jax and the lost crews of the Retribution and the Reapers. He had hoped it would be enough to assuage the brewing resentment, to justify the terrifying power they had unleashed. He was wrong. Admiral Sharma, now hailed as a tactical genius, oversaw the methodical dismantling of the remaining swarm forces. Without their central command, the swarm became a manageable, if still dangerous, pest. Humanity's brutal efficiency shone in the mop-up operations. They did not simply destroy the swarm, they harvested it, converting its organic matter into fuel and raw materials for their burgeoning fleet. Learning its secrets with every encounter, the Tartarus Reach, once a desolate wasteland, buzzed with the construction of massive Terran shipyards and fortified outposts. They were building, and they were expanding. The consortium watched, increasingly alarmed. Xylar, now appointed the official liaison to the Terran Dominion, became a perpetual bridge between two incompatible philosophies. He saw the cold logic in humanity's expansion, the need for resources, for strategic depth, for forward operating bases in anticipation of future threats. But the Conclave saw only a hostile takeover, a cancerous growth on the pristine body of galactic civilization. The debates in the Grand Conclave grew increasingly heated. Admiral Kalen, his outrage magnified by the consortium's grudging respect for the humans, became the loudest voice of dissent. "They are not allies, they are invaders," he bellowed in one particularly fiery session. "They are turning the Tartarus Reach into a military stronghold, converting swarm matter into weapons. They are using our gratitude as a shield to seize control." Xylar countered with the only argument that mattered. They are still fighting the swarm. The threat is diminished, but not extinguished. And who among us would dare to confront them? Their fleet is now arguably the most powerful in the galaxy. Their methods, however unpalatable, saved us all. The uncomfortable truth hung in the air. The consortium's Aegis fleet, designed for policing and defense, was simply not equipped to fight humanity's war machine. They had asked for a monster, and the monster had grown too strong to contain. On Terminus, in the depths of the newly constructed Imperial War Complex, Jax had recovered, his broken arm now reinforced with a gleaming, multi-jointed prosthetic. He sat across from Sharma in her Spartan office, a holographic map of the galaxy between them. The map showed the remaining swarm pockets dwindling, but it also showed the steadily expanding red lines marking the Terran Dominion. "The consortium is getting antsy," Jax commented, picking at a loose thread on his uniform. "Kalen's speeches are getting louder." Sharma's gaze remained fixed on the map, her expression unreadable. "Let them talk. While they talk, we work. While they debate, we build. While they argue over treaties, we consolidate our power." She pointed to a cluster of systems on the galactic rim, far from the consortium's core worlds. "The remnants of the swarm are fleeing into the unknown regions. We will pursue, but we will not simply destroy them. We will find their origin. We will understand what created them. And then we will finish them utterly." Jax understood the unspoken implication. This was not just about eradication. This was about preemption, about ensuring no such threat could ever rise again, about claiming the ultimate authority to define and eliminate galactic threats. "And the consortium," he asked, a hint of challenge in his voice. Sharma finally looked at him, her eyes cold as deep space. "The consortium will fall into line, or they will be swept aside. They chose to unleash us. Now they will learn the true nature of their choice." Months turned into a year. The swarm was systematically hunted down, pursued across uncharted nebulae, its final vestiges eradicated on a barren, ice-bound world at the very edge of the known galaxy. Humanity had won. The threat was gone. The galaxy was safe, but it was not peaceful. The Terran Dominion, forged in the crucible of war, did not demobilize. Its fleets continued to patrol. Its shipyards continued to produce. Its soldiers continued to train. The Tartarus Reach, once a forgotten scar, became the beating heart of a new, formidable empire. Its capital, Terminus, was no longer a makeshift base but a sprawling, fortified city, its towers reaching into the radiation-tinged skies, its depths burrowing into the planet's core. Xylar stood on a newly built observation deck on Terminus, looking out at the endless stream of Terran warships departing for patrol, for exploration, for something else. Beside him, Admiral Sharma, her uniform now bearing the insignia of the Terran Supreme Commander, watched the same sight. "It is over," Xylar said, a note of weariness in his voice. "The swarm is gone. The galaxy is secure." Sharma turned to him, her face devoid of triumph, only a quiet, resolute power. "Is it, Director, or has the nature of the threat simply changed?" She gestured to the vast, star-swept vista before them. The consortium believed in order, in peace, in trade. They built a civilization on the assumption that war was a choice, a regrettable anomaly. We built ours on the understanding that war is a constant, that it is not a choice, but an inevitability, a force of nature. She looked at him, her gaze piercing. "You said you hired wolves to guard the herd, but the wolves are not going to return to their den just because the sheep are safe. The galaxy is a dangerous place. Director, it always has been, and someone has to protect it. Someone has to maintain order. Someone has to be ready for the next swarm, or the next, but whatever comes after that." Xylar looked from the new commander to the endless, watchful fleets. He understood. The old order, the comfortable, calculating consortium, was obsolete. It had failed, and in its place, a new, harsher order had risen, born of blood and iron, utterly prepared for a universe that demanded more than diplomacy and trade. He had opened the cage, and the wolves had not just killed the monster, they had claimed the entire forest as their new territory. The galaxy was safe. Yes, but it was safe because it was now under the watchful, unblinking eyes of a species that understood fear, understood conflict, and was prepared to wage eternal war to preserve its hard-won peace. The silence of the void was no longer empty. It was filled with the silent hum of Terran engines, forever vigilant.